Today on the Inchstones podcast, I have a friend of mine who came into my life through a professional venture. And when I first started speaking about neurodiversity, Andrea Li was one of the first human resources officers to say, yes, the conversations that you're bringing up about neurodiversity are not only wanted, but are necessary. And I have Andrea Li here today. She is the Senior Director of Global Human Resources for Malin and Goetz. So thank you for being here today, Andrea.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here.
Your trajectory as an HR executive has been in New York City. You are a powerhouse. You are not in a small little industry at all. You've done it for 13 years. How has the landscape of the workplace culture began since you started your career in HR?
Definitely seen a big shift in the 13 years that I've been in focusing just on human resources. I think, there was a time when I first started that HR was relegated to paper pushing, right? And that's how HR was seen. So that's kind of what created the culture of the brands that I worked in. Over time, as the shift in HR is how we were perceived, I've started to see a shift in just company culture in general. There's more tolerance, there's more acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
There's more understanding that the culture of the brand is created not just by the leadership, but by the employees in general, right? There was this misnomer, this misconception when I first started in the brand that HR was the culture creator, right? It was on every job description for every job I applied for, create company culture. That's not who we are. That's not what we are. I consider myself a gatekeeper of culture, but one person, one team cannot create a company of 200 employees culture, right? That starts at the top, that starts with leadership, and it trickles, it rolls, and it continues with the employee population that we hire, that we bring on board. That's where real culture of the company is truly created.
Do you feel like that was part of the embers of why you even went in to HR in the first place? Like it sounds like you're describing that HR originally, or maybe years ago, was like the one pager, right? Like every person was a one pager and it was a stack of papers, but that was a stack of people. And you saw the complexity of humans beyond that stack of paper individuals.
Absolutely. I think I've never wanted to work for a company or in a brand where employees are seen as numbers. I've done that. I worked for Abercrombie in the early 2000s.
Oh, right.
Like I was a shop manager for them, so I worked in retail. So I've seen toxic culture and I've seen really positive culture. And I've worked as a number. I wasn't Andrea Greenberg at the time. I made a name. I was employee 3,252. So part of moving into the HR function was to do my part to ensure that people didn't feel
experience
that my employees didn't experience that. We are more than just the pages on our desk. We're more than just our W-2s, our I-9s, our job descriptions. We're human. And every human is different. And that's what creates the culture. When we can all come together as humans with our differences, with our different complexities, and be able to create something amazing and magical.
I know you and I probably can speak for hours on this, but the ability for each human to change the dynamics of a team from a competitive advantage with a brand is something that is fascinating to me in my work, because I see how differently the neurological circuitry of a neurodiverse brain takes in the world. So if the person on a team is able to share that broadens the scope of what the company can provide to a customer base, if I'm saying that correctly. How do you harness that and foster that as the leader of people? How do you do that?
So for me, it's by meeting the employee where they're at and by seeing them for who they are, because every employee is different. And one thing I learned very early in my career is everyone learns differently, everyone processes differently, everyone takes in information differently. And with neurodiversity and neurodivergent employees, it's same, but to a different degree, right? So it's about meeting them where they are and and speaking with them, asking them, what can I do to make this easier for you, to help
Mhm.
you understand better so you can thrive the same as I would for truly any employee, because everybody learns differently. Everyone takes in information differently. And like I said, I learned that really early on in my career, through my own work and mistakes and learning not to make those same mistakes, same mistakes again. I think we, growing up in our generation, we were taught, you keep hearing, think outside
Mhm.
the box, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
think outside the box. Like, push away like the proverbial glass ceiling, think outside the box. And, you know, you would do that with my neurodiverse employees just as I would any other employee. And they just have a different way of thinking outside the box, which is such a competitive advantage,
That's
right?
what I
Because
keep
they're
seeing.
seeing it in a different way than you or I could ever see it.
Right, I think, what you learn maybe whether it's through your own career as being, like you said, from a store manager of a brand to where you are now, human first approach. And what I think that there's a lot of societal pushback to, the buzzword, the buzz acronym of the year, DEI. It's humans first about growth, not humans first about siloing and separating. And that the ability for in a neurodivergent brain is global. Like you're going to find that people process, see the world, take in sensory experiences, and particularly with a brand like Malin and Goetz, where all of your senses are being used for your brand, right? I would guess that it's different than clothing, right? There's a lot of things that with obviously textures and stuff, but with the with the scent aspect of a brand, and that is global. Like you can go anywhere in the world and talk about the way that your senses take in a space or a country or a culture. That doesn't change from a person that is of Japanese origin to a person that is Greek. That their brain, a Greek neurodiverse person and a Japanese neurodiverse person and a American raised neurodiverse woman with late diagnosed ADHD, we do not have the typical brain structures to take in the senses of something typical. And that's a good thing.
Right. I agree. I fully agree. And I think it's time to embrace that and to really, I know I keep going back to like thinking outside that box, but it's so true. It's to embrace that and really think outside the box and understand that, neurodivergent employees or customers just see things in a different way. And we want them to have the same positive experience that a
Yes.
non-neurodiverse customer or employee will have.
And I'm really glad that you brought up that phrase, think outside the box, because hearing you say that, I'm in fourth grade again. I am literally in fourth grade again in Mrs. Barandowski's class going, yeah, okay, I think differently. Yes. Okay, think outside the box, Sarah. But I already was thinking outside the box because I was seeing the world differently. So
Right.
that was my first foray into being accepted or understanding how the brain's acceptance works. But now that you get to lead from the knowledge of growing up with that phrase, as I did,
Mhm.
to now leading from that phrase and the broadening it, I guess all that to say, what a beautiful position you're in from a
It's
global
it's
brand sense.
it's really true. I am very lucky that, that has kind of stuck with me and that's how I lead, right?
Yes.
And I lead my HR team here and I lead the company and the brand in general as the culture gatekeeper.
Yes. What is the best way to break that cultural fit hiring mentality? What is that best way? What does that look like in the process?
I mean,
It's so easy, Andrea. It's just like it's the easy button, right?
it truly, the thing is though, it truly is. When you're looking at resumes or job applications, one thing that we do here is we look at every resume. We don't just, look at the first five that like float through,
Mm-hmm.
right? We do. We truly honestly look at
Mm-hmm.
every resume and like screen that way. And I think when you're hiring, you're looking for, I don't look for culture fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the stereotypical way. Someone will say, well, you have to be a fit for culture. I've worked for brands in my life where it was very important, like you have to fit a certain box, right? But that's not how I hire, right? What makes the culture here where I am currently so special is that we're all different.
Yeah.
We're not cookie cutter,
Mm-hmm.
right? We all come from amazing different backgrounds, and everyone here was hired because they were the best person for the job, right? And our culture, it's about tolerance. It's about, acceptance. It's
Mm-hmm.
about kindness.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, I mean, the values here are incredible. It's empathy, humanity, and the brand actually lives and breathes the values and actions them versus them just being on a poster like by the bathroom.
Can you say those three words again? Because I think that's real.
Empathy, humanity, fight.
Empathy, humanity, fight. Can
Yeah.
you talk about each one of those for me and what that looks like for you on a day to day? Because I think those are really powerful. The full scope of someone's humanity.
Yeah.
And that doesn't change when they go and are seeking out employment. So talk to me about those three words. That I love those.
I mean, they were fantastic. And it's part of the reason that I decided to come to work here at Malin and Goetz was the values and the fact that I could see through, my interview process that the values were actually alive in the brand and actioned in the
Mm-hmm.
brand versus just we need to have some values so we
Mm-hmm.
sound good, right?
Right.
And I
Right.
think every day coming in, like I lead with empathy, right? And empathy is different than sympathy. And I think people
Absolutely.
sometimes confuse that, but I will always lead with empathy. Even if I think what you've done is not the right thing, I will still lead with empathy. And that's
Mhm.
how we, want our leaders here at the company to build out their teams and to, lead their teams and develop their people is with empathy, and that goes hand in hand with humanity. You're
Mhm.
like seeing the person,
Mhm.
right? Knowing that, you know, one of the things that I was taught when I first entered the workforce is you leave your emotions at the door. You leave your feelings at the door. You don't bring your your
You're
personal private
mhm.
into work with you.
Mhm.
That's impossible.
It's impossible. It's
We're
absolutely impossible.
humans. We have emotion, right? And that's where the humanity comes in. Knowing that every person is not just, a robot here to work for you from 9 to 5 at the
Mhm.
laptop,
Mhm.
right? They have things that happen in their lives.
Their mental load, I
Their
always say, their
mental
mental
load.
load, and
Exactly.
how that can change and look so different from person to person. And I always say it's relative, even as a special needs mom, and I am around mothers of only typical children all the time. I can absolutely understand the relative stress. It still can feel from the adrenaline cortisol rushes of stress in one's body the same. And basically is what you're saying is that everyone's coming to work with the same, stress hormones or life
Exactly.
stressors. It just how they are experienced is different.
Exactly. It looks different on everyone. And like I
Mhm.
was saying earlier, the way people learn is different. The way people handle their stressors in their personal lives are different. Some people are really good at like shutting it off at the door. Other people can't. Right. And there's triggers and things of that nature. And it's about leading with that humanity and understanding that every person is different and the way
Mhm.
we handle certain things are different. The way we handle stressors are different. And we need to lead with that, right?
How do you begin the discussion from a HR point of view with an employee that shares that they have neurodiversity, that they have ADHD, or that they have dyslexia, and that it's or one of the many other diagnoses that falls under that umbrella, being given that information. How do you take that in to disseminate in a way that is binding? This is about a company, like you said, who is based on these wonderful values, that is living them, taking in that person, sharing and spreading it appropriately within their team, allowing for the sensitivity, allowing for that empathy, and then knowing at the end of the day, this is about a growth of a brand. How does that work? Because I can see the fire and I can hear how passionate you are about that. What does that actually look like, maybe on a simple day-to-day scale?
I always let them lead, and I tell them that this is your show, and I will follow your lead. We will disseminate the information as to how you see fit.
Hmm.
You don't want anyone but me to know,
Mm-hmm.
that is more than fine.
Mm-hmm.
You feel that it's valuable for your team to know,
Mm-hmm.
I will follow that too. I always advise that, yes, do I personally think that is valuable for your team to know?
Mm-hmm.
100% I do. But
Mm-hmm.
at this point in time, it's your decision. So
Mm-hmm.
I will follow your lead.
Mm-hmm.
I will also give you all the help that you need to ensure that you're able to operate at your best.
Right. Right.
Whether, if it's dyslexia, do you need extra time
Mm-hmm.
to get through
Mm-hmm.
anything? Need extra time to pull the decks or to pull the numbers or to
Mm-hmm.
do the
Mm-hmm.
reporting,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what do you need from me to ensure that you are working at your best,
At
to
every
get
at
to
every
the brand?
point. Right. You shared that the target audience for Malin and Goetz is global, and it's a global simplicity with high efficacy values. It's a broad scope to include the everyness of everyone.
Yeah.
And yet, as someone who has children that have high sensitivities to things, knowing that a brand leads with the simplicity of its efficacy actually is very calming. We're going to let the simplicity and efficacy speak for itself, and also have a beautiful branding and beautiful simplicity that shows that simple things can be beautiful too.
100%. I mean, the brand is very lucky. Our brand was founded 20 years ago, and our founders are pioneers in this space. We're one of the first gender neutral
Hmm.
brands.
Hmm.
Simple. It was based on simplicity,
Hmm.
like your amazing, beautiful product in
Hmm.
its simplest
Yes.
form.
Hmm.
And we're very lucky to have been based on that and to not have that through
Hmm.
washed out, right? There's
Yes.
so many brands out there that were founded on such a simple ethos. And through time, as they scale or grow, the beauty of how they started has been completely obliterated, for lack of a better term. I'm so lucky, and we are so lucky that this brand is not one of those, that we still have that simplicity and beauty of the brand
Hmm.
that founders started 20 plus years ago. I globalness of the brand. I was just in Hong Kong on vacation, and I got to visit one of our stores
So cool.
over there. And, it was just incredible to see how our product had the same effect
Yes.
on customers in Hong Kong as it does in my West Coast stores, my
Yes.
East Coast stores, my London stores. Like, to take a step back, like I kind of just stood outside the store and observed it for a bit,
Yes.
and then stood inside the store and just like observed the customers and whatnot. And it was the same magic there that you get in any one of our stores. And that's just
Yes.
incredible. And it's so rare for that
Hmm.
consistency to
That's
happen.
that's something my partner Mark and I talk about a lot, because it's based on his work too, is humans first, always. And that even as a global community, the founders of Malin and Goetz could have desired this. They probably did desire this, but it took a very conscious crafting to allow that to go from a smaller new company 20 years ago to where it is now, to where you can go in as a global director of HR from Hong Kong to London, and actually say that the customers coming in there are experiencing a similar simplicity and sensory validating atmosphere it's so conscious about humans. Neurodiversity is global. So in doing that, you're actually broadening your consumer base. You're broadening where you can be competitive against other brands.
100%. I think our experience in our stores is built out so you can experience it with all your different senses. So everyone can enjoy coming into one of our stores, from, the hand massages to the candles being lit. So you have a scent, when you walk into the store to, a face scrub being put on to, there's just so much to explore when you come into our stores, and there's so much for everyone there, whether, it's understanding, having a neurodiverse customer come in and understanding, the touch aspect, right? Or someone coming in and the scent aspect. There's so much there to be able to wrap our arms around everyone.
Do you find that as a whole in the HR industry, that there is a greater study and research from just like a role that you are in with your peers in different brands? There's curiosity around it. Do you find that there's curiosity?
There definitely is. I think there's much more curiosity around it now as we talk about it. It's interesting to me because as, I've talked about coming on the podcast and I've talked about you coming to speak to my employees and how we've met in our professional, world. And I said, oh, well, she's a neurodiversity advocate. And people are like, what's neurodiversity? What is that? What does that word mean? So it's a conversation starter. It's a conversation
Exactly.
starter, right? And I think there's so much more curiosity around what that means and what that word encompasses and entails.
That's it's probably becoming my 2025 word of the year because curiosity is based in asking questions. You and I, on paper, to go back to the first thing that you said, on paper, we probably have a lot of overlap. We probably have a lot of things that are like blaringly different just from a culture and homes that we were raised in and the educational paths that we took. And at the same time, I believe that it's our curiosity as professionals that has allowed for collaboration and the openness to bring that to other people, to your teams, for me to stay curious. It does make me laugh. One of the companies that came back to me, it has for them the second year, is actually is a global construction company.
Wow.
If you would have told me 2 years ago when I first began this foray into speaking, and was with you at your former brand, I never in a million years would have been like, you know what, the people that are building the JP Morgan Chase building, they really want a neurodiversity speaker. But that mindset that is now infiltrating a lot of different industries too. And so by staying curious, even companies that might have more of a rigidity expectation from those that they interact with, they're not. They're actually opening up their own employee groups to ask questions and stay curious.
And I think it's incredible. I truly do. I think so many different industries have shifted
Mm-hmm.
throughout the years. And I honestly think that a lot of it has to do with this new generation coming
Mm-hmm.
into the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
They look at work in a completely different way
Mm-hmm.
than we were taught to and the
Mm-hmm.
generation above us was taught to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to see the shift as because overlapping generations, right? It's so interesting to see the shift in the thought process of the new
Mm-hmm.
generation,
Mm-hmm.
what's important to them in the workplace, the humanity, seeing everybody as a human, right? The mental health is huge for this new generation coming in, a true work-life balance for this new generation. And I think they've truly and will truly change the face of work and how what we do when they truly see every human as a human and not
Right.
just paper.
And we're like the sandwich generation right now. Like we are actually in the middle place of these generations and in the position where you are leading in the companies. I always find that when I stay curious to older generations, to their experience about their career trajectory and what that looked like, because a younger generation stays curious to theirs, they might understand why it's good to stay curious to different neurological differences,
Exactly.
right? Because they were told to push that down, not because it was wrong, but because that didn't fuel brand awareness, that didn't fuel the numbers, that didn't grow, that wasn't competitive. But I think when you allow for the employees to stay curious about each other, then it validates that no way is wrong. It's just that's the evolution of life and, you know, companies in general.
100%. And they also you work better together when you
Mm-hmm.
understand who you're working with and you
Yes.
understand the way they think,
Mm-hmm.
and you figure out a good way to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what's going to push forward the ROI.
Yes.
That's what's going to push
Yes.
forward brand awareness.
Yes.
I
Yes.
just because the older generation work till 10 p.m. every night and when
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make it right.
No, but they did that, and that was their lived experience, and how that
Correct.
affects and informs them to make decisions now is valid. You know, we cannot like it,
100%.
or Gen Z doesn't have to like that, or they might not like that. Gosh, well, you didn't ever hire anyone that was on the spectrum, or you never even thought to include something as silly as a choice of light in an office, right? That might allow for a better work environment. We don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
And as I do really believe that specifically in the role that you are someone, and I'm so thankful for this, you are someone who knows better and chooses to do better. And that takes energy. And we don't have endless energy. We are not machines, as you said at the beginning. And we don't have a bucket of endless energy. There is a bandwidth of it. And so I thank you for being someone and a pioneer within retail and branding that is saying, and you are choosing to use this energy and this capacity to forward it from a global scale of human resources. So I hope that you really do take stock in that. And as I say to my children every day, and I'm going to say it to you, I'm proud of you as someone to know you, but you should be really proud of yourself. You
Thank
really
you.
should. You really should, because 13 years in an industry like this, you have learned a lot.
Yeah, I have.
You're like, I can see the Rolodex in your, like the scenes playing in your mind of
Right.
like what
I
you've
have.
seen.
I've definitely learned a lot, and I've learned about how to expend my energy. I like how you talked about the energy and, not having
It's not endless.
endless or limitless energy.
Limitless, yes.
I've learned how in my 13 years to really focus in on what is right.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my industry, there's a lot of gray, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
black and white when it comes to legal issues. We're always going to have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black and white legal issues. There's labor
Mm-hmm.
law, employment law for
Yep.
reasons, right?
Yep.
But my world lives in a lot of gray, and a lot of it comes down to what is morally right.
That's right.
And that is where I want to expend my energy.
Mm-hmm.
What is morally right
Mm-hmm.
for my employees, for my business, for me?
Leading like that, because Matthew McConaughey wrote it in his book, or he says while talking about his book in some podcasts, he said, I looked at myself in the mirror and said, McConaughey, the only person you're not getting away from is yourself. Right. So in the role that you live and do every day, no one else wakes up as Andrea Li. No one else wakes up as Andrea Li, Senior Global Director of Human Resources for Malin and Goetz. And you get to be the best version of that because you have a company that's supporting it from the ground up of humans. I think that the company is so successful globally and is giving the experience that they obviously as founders had hoped to give on a global scale. You are going to enmesh neurodiversity within the company culture, likely as beautifully as the brand itself evolved, which is, this is just who we are as people. And it's as simple as that.
It, you're so right. It's as
It's as
simple
simple
as
as that.
that. It
And,
really is.
now I'm just thinking, I can't wait to bring Millie into one of your, brick and mortar stores, because she loves sampling, lotions and things. And I know that it can be overwhelming, but it's also so much fun for her when you smell a great combination of essential oils and scents. I'm now plotting out my next fenced-in playground New York City visit, plus a Malin and Goetz store.
You have to come in. I
Yeah.
mean, Millie will have so much fun in her store. You can see she will have so much fun in her store.
It's funny. She's becoming very prolific on her device. She might actually have comments about the lettering and the packaging over the actual product that it's contained in. She might say MALIN plus sign, plus sign, plus sign. I hope that you just really take stock in the work that you're doing because it's powerful. And I'm so thankful to be aligned with you and to see where you go as within your career, because you get to wake up as Andrea every day. And Malin and Goetz is so blessed to have you as an employee and your team as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, seeing you on your journey the last 2 years has been incredible. It truly has been incredible to watch what you've been able to do and watch what you've been able to build and really get your voice out there with a message that needs to be heard. So I am just beyond proud of you, Sarah.
Well, thank you. Well, the conversations, like I said, the conversations that we get to have that allow for a greater understanding. Well, I'm excited to come in. I'm excited to see the conversations that we will have live, but I'm most importantly really thankful for what Malin and Goetz does as a brand, because it should be the gold standard of what actual inclusion looks like. It's a faceless entity, and it's a feeling, and that's really hard to harness, but y'all have done it beautifully.
Thank you.
So until next time on the Inchstones podcast.